The corridor stretches out in front of you, long, cold, silent. The stone beneath your feet is worn smooth, not by time but by repetition. Steps, daily, always the same. There are no windows, just flickering torchlight and the stale breath of damp masonry. Every sound is muffled by stone, the distant shuffle of guards, the scratch of a rat beneath the floor, the slow, reluctant beat of your own heart. You reach the door. It is wooden, thick as a coffin lid, banded with rusted iron. The keyhole is black, empty, sealed from the outside. You place your hand on the wood. It's cold, unmoving. But behind it, someone is alive. Not a prisoner, not exactly. This is a royal chamber, a place built not to punish, but to hide. The tapestries have rotted away, the mirrors have been removed, the windows shuttered, no courtiers enter, no songs echo through the halls. Behind this door is a queen. She's still breathing, still waiting. Her name is Juana of Castile, daughter of Isabella the Catholic, who conquered Granada and launched an empire, granddaughter of warriors, mother of kings, wife to the most beautiful man in Europe, and still buried alive inside a palace. You don't know what she looks like now. No one does. It's been too long. Her face faded from memory. Everyone except the stone forgot her voice. But she is in there, alive. Her body moves. Her mouth forms words. Her heart still beats its slow rhythm of royal descent. But no one calls her queen. Not anymore. They call her something else. La Loca, the mad one. But mad women don't wear crowns, so they left the crown in her name and locked the woman away. You wonder how many days she has spent inside this room. The answer is simple. 20 years. 2 decades of darkness and whispers, of silence punctuated by screams, of seasons that changed without permission, of prayers unanswered, of bones aging inside silk. She's not a fairy tale. She's not a metaphor. She's real. Flesh. Blood. Ruin. They said it was for her safety, for the safety of the realm, for the children, for God. But the truth is more straightforward and darker. She was inconvenient, so they removed her. But they didn't kill her. That would have made her a martyr. They didn't exile her. That would have made her a story. Instead, they did something worse. They made her disappear, not from the earth, but from memory. And so the world moved on. Empires rose. Her sons ruled. New wars began, and the locked door remained, unchanged, unopened, just a door and a hallway. No one visits anymore. But you came, and now you're standing here, hand on wood, listening to the silence behind it, wondering if she knows, wondering if she still waits. They say she still speaks sometimes, to her husband's ghost, to her own reflection, long since vanished, to God, to no one. And when she does, the sound is not a whisper, is not a cry. It's the sound of a queen still reigning inside her ruin. She was never meant to be a story. Juana was born in a palace carved from ambition, not love. Her mother was Isabella of Castile, the warrior queen, the woman who broke the Moors and baptized a continent in blood. Her father, Ferdinand of Aragon, was shrewd, steel-eyed, and always calculating. Together they forged a single kingdom from 2 thrones, unified by marriage and war. They didn't raise children. They raised heirs. Juana was the third, not the brightest, not the favourite, not the one destined to wear the crown. That burden fell to her elder siblings. She was a spare, trained not to rule, but to marry. Still, she was not ordinary. Even as a child, she made people uncomfortable. There was a weight behind her eyes, a sharpness. Her tutors noted her brilliance, but also her silence, her piety, obsessive, her intelligence, unsettling. She wept without warning. She stared too long. She prayed too hard. She argued theology with priests twice her age. She spoke little, but when she did, she asked questions no one wanted to answer. Why must women obey? Why does God punish love? Why does duty taste like iron? At court, the whispers began early. Strange girl, too serious, too intense. But Isabella dismissed them. She had no time for fragility. Spain was expanding. The Inquisition was purifying souls. Granada had fallen, Columbus had sailed, the world was changing, and Juana would serve the crown. So they gave her away, to Philip the Handsome, Archduke of Austria, son of the Holy Roman Emperor, blonde hair like polished gold, a jaw sculpted by statues, a mouth that smiled even when lying. Juana was 16. She met him for the first time in Flanders. She expected a man of God and governance. She found a boy who smelled of musk and wine, who laughed at Latin and chased chambermaids. But when he looked at her, really looked, something inside her cracked open, and she fell. Not with caution, not with dignity, with fire. Juana loved him with the kind of love that wounds. It wasn't devotion, it was hunger, a need that clawed beneath the skin. She wrote him letters soaked in longing. She waited at the windows. She scratched her arms when he didn't come. When he smiled at other women, she screamed. When he returned to her, she melted. The court called it passion. Then they called it something else, obsession, madness, possession. They said her eyes were too wide. She mumbled prayers in the middle of the night, that she wandered halls barefoot speaking to saints who never answered, that she scratched the face of a lady in waiting to touch Philip's shoulder. She clutched him so tightly that he bruised. Philip laughed, then pulled away, then laughed again. He ruled through charm, she ruled through silence. He made courtiers swoon, she made them afraid, and in their shadows children were born, 6 in 10 years, heirs to empires, future monarchs. But Juana never stopped looking at him as if she were drowning, and he never stopped pretending not to notice. She was a queen in waiting, a pawn in silk. A woman was too devout for court and too human for power, and as her crown drew closer, so did the rumours. She doesn't sleep, she doesn't eat, she talks about paintings, she sings to candles, she watches Philip while he sleeps, she whispers when no one's there. She was educated, she was royal, she was brilliant, but she was also something no royal woman was allowed to be. She was unpredictable, and in Spain, unpredictability was often equated with danger. He was called Philip the Handsome, but not by her. To Juana he was something more profound, stranger, a storm with a heartbeat. His beauty wasn't comfort, it was power. His smile promised salvation, and then withheld it. His touch was rare, calculated, and intoxicating, and she needed it more than she needed food. But Philip was not built for love. He was built for rooms full of mirrors, for velvet capes and soft-throated laughter. He liked women who bent around his desires, who curtsied when dismissed, smiled when discarded. Juana did neither. When he flirted, she followed. When he lied, she stared. When he disappeared into the chambers of other women, she waited outside the door, silent, barefoot, trembling. And when he emerged, she didn't leave. She asked questions, too many. At first he laughed, called her passionate, Spanish, intense. But passion curdled quickly. He began to avoid her. She began to unravel. The court watched it happen in real time, whispers trailing behind every corridor like perfume. The queen walks in circles. The queen won't eat unless he feeds her. The queen rips her gowns when he's late. The queen tried to cut her hair with a dinner knife. The queen watches him sleep, all night, without blinking. And Philip? He weaponized it. Every moment of affection was a trap, every withheld kiss a punishment. He disappeared for days, then returned smelling of perfume she didn't wear. He denied everything, then admitted everything, then denied it again. And Juana clung harder. He told her she was embarrassing him. She told him she loved him. He told her she was mad. She began to believe it. She started praying more, fasting, punishing her body to prove her worth. She whipped herself in private. She wept at the Virgin's feet for hours. She confessed sins she hadn't committed just to empty herself, just to make room for the love he withheld. And still, she bore him children. 6. Each one a miracle wrapped in noise, blood and exhaustion. She bled through sheets. I was nursed through tears, handed them off to wet nurses while trying to hold Philip's hand, but nothing rooted him. Not the girl, not the boys, not the empire forming beneath her skin. She was a queen in theory, but no one let her rule. She was a wife in name, but no one made her feel like one, and when she lost control, the court leaned in. They began using the word in whispers. Loca, madam, not sad, not hurt, not wounded by betrayal, madam. Because she cried when he kissed another woman, because she screamed when he left for war, because she collapsed in the hallway when he called her a burden. They called her unstable, hysterical, dangerous. But no one mentioned the bruises on her thighs, the night she slept on the floor outside his locked chamber, the way he spoke to her in public, mocking, distant, condescending. No one said the word abuse. They said she was cursed, that her blood was wrong, that her mother had been too strong, and Juana too weak. The line had snapped somewhere between the crown and cradle, that queens don't cry like that, don't love like that. They said madness ran in her veins, when really it had been fed to her drop by drop, in gaslight, in silence, in Philip's poisoned affections. And all the while she kept smiling, kept kneeling beside him, kept pretending the empire wasn't slipping from her fingers. Because in her mind, if she could just make him stay, if she could just be better, quieter, purer, she could still be loved, even as the world decided she was too broken to rule, too dangerous to trust, too mad to matter. She was still his wife, and that to her was everything, even if it was killing her. He died without warning. One day, Philip the Handsome, her husband, her obsession, her torment, was alive, riding through the fields in a cloud of gold and applause. The next he was coughing blood into his wine, his skin turning grey, his limbs stiffening by the hour. They said it was a fever. They said it was poison. Some whispered it was a punishment from God. Others claimed it was the queen, mad with jealousy, finally taking revenge on the man who broke her. But Juana? She didn't speak. She just sat beside him, eyes wide, hands folded like prayer. She didn't eat, didn't blink, didn't weep. Not at first. The body lay on a velvet bier in a candlelit chamber. Courtiers came and went, bishops prayed, nurses carried her children away, and Juana sat for hours, then days, then weeks. The chamber stank of flowers, wax, and the slow rot of royal flesh. Still, she would not bury him. She kissed his lips. She adjusted his sleeves. She asked the servants to redress him in fresh clothes. The court said she was mourning, but mourning has rules, and Juana had broken all of them. When they tried to take his body for burial, she screamed, fought, bit a priest's hand. She clutched Philip's corpse like a mother clutching a dying child. She refused to let him go. They say she slept beside the coffin for nights, whispered to it, rocked it gently. Then she gave the order. They would travel. The bier was loaded onto a royal cart draped in cloth of gold. Juana rode beside it. Not behind, not ahead. Beside. Night after night, the Queen of Castile paraded her dead husband through the countryside, town to town, fortress to fortress. Each night she demanded he be brought into the chamber with her. Each night she insisted his clothes be changed. She forbade women from coming near him. She stopped at the convents, demanded the nuns open their gates to the bier, slept with her head against the wooden box, then moved on. This was not grief. This was a ritual, a twisted, aching imitation of love that refused to decay even as his body did. The court was silent. The people whispered. Church leaders protested. This was not Christian mourning. This was an obsession, necromancy, madness. And so the word returned. La Loca. It clung to her now like a second skin. The woman who rode with a corpse. The queen who spoke to the dead. The mother who abandoned her children to cradle decay. But no one spoke of the loneliness behind it. No one asked what happens when a woman raised to obey is finally stripped of the one thing she believed loved her, even if he didn't. No one questioned the cracks he left in her long before he stopped breathing. They only saw the performance. They called her monstrous, unholy, demented. And in secret meetings, her father, the great Ferdinand, began to move. A mad woman could not rule Spain. Her children were too young. The empire was too fragile. Her grief was too loud. He sent envoys, then doctors, then guards. They took Philip's body from her by force and locked Juana in a room without mirrors, without windows, without sound. She had given birth to emperors. She had carried the corpse of a king. But now she was no longer a queen. It's just a problem to be contained. A woman who loved too loudly, grieved too visibly, refused to let rot be buried. They told her it was for her safety, that the world outside was dangerous, that people whispered things they shouldn't, that she needed rest, that her soul needed healing, that grief required stillness. So they brought her to Tordesillas, an ancient fortress twisted into a cage, and they locked the door behind her, not with chains, with velvet, with duty, with the love of a father who ruled Spain and feared embarrassment more than loss. The Queen of Castile, once paraded through courts and jewels and lace, was now confined to a stone chamber with no throne, no servants, and no choices. A bed, a small altar, a single, narrow slit of a window, no mirrors, no clock, no audience. Only her breath reminded her she was alive. At first she waited. Each day she rose at dawn, braided her hair, whispered prayers, walked the edge of the chamber as if it were a ballroom, practiced curtsies, smiled at the air. She believed this was temporary, a misunderstanding, a pause. Philip would come. The door would open. It didn't. Instead, they brought her one companion. Her daughter, Infanta Catalina, was barely able to walk, her eyes wide and wordless. Juana clung to her like driftwood in a drowning sea. She braided the child's hair, told her stories, sang to her in 3 languages, dressed her in scraps of linen she sewed by hand. The child was a beacon of light in the darkness, and so they took her away. Too old, they said, too vulnerable. It's better to be raised by nuns. It was better not to see what her mother was becoming. It's better to forget. Juana begged, screamed, beat her arms until they bled. They carried the child down the hallway and never brought her back. After that, Juana stopped looking at the door. Time bled sideways. There were no weeks, no months, only pulses of sound and shadow. Footsteps equals food. Footsteps equals confession. Footsteps. Another doctor, another priest, another attempt to extract madness like poison from a wound. But Juana was not mad. She was rotting in silence. Her fingernails grew long, then broke. Her skin turned pale, then grey. Her teeth loosened. Her hair fell in patches, but she still walked the room, still whispered to Philip as if he were there, crouched in the corner like a shadow with the golden hair. Sometimes she knelt in prayer for hours, unmoving. Sometimes she pressed her ear to the wall, listening for the child she could no longer hear. Sometimes she simply stood still, so still the guards outside swore they didn't hear her breathe for hours, and always she waited for someone to tell her it was over, that she could come back, that she was still real. But no one came. The room became her world, the drafts her weather, the cobwebs her calendar. And in time, Even her body betrayed her. Her legs weakened, her eyes dulled, her voice thinned to a hush, but her mind remained. That was the tragedy. She remembered everything: the sound of court musicians, the feel of her children's fingers, the weight of a crown on her brow, the curve of Philip's shoulder, the betrayal in her father's voice when he said, "It's only for now." No one ruled this kingdom. There were no subjects, no laws, just stone, silence, and a queen who had once been too alive for a world that only rewarded control. And so she ruled the only way left, by breathing inside the grave they had given her and refusing, quietly, stubbornly, heartbreakingly, to die. They still sent people, not often, not regularly, but enough to remind her she was watched. The door would creak open without warning, and in would come the procession. Priests in black, faces pale, fingers crossed, holy water clutched like a blade. They carried books, relics, and fear. They came not to comfort, but to correct. They said she was possessed, that something dark had nested inside her, that only faith could burn it out. They made her fast for days, bathed her in icy water, forced her to kneel until her legs swelled. One priest stood beside her for 12 hours straight, shouting Latin while she stared at the wall. She did not blink, not once. Another tried to hold a crucifix to her lips. She bit his hand and laughed, then sobbed. Then they screamed so violently they had to leave the chamber for hours just to breathe again. It didn't work. None of it worked. So they tried the opposite. Silence. Just a tray of food. A whispered prayer through the crack in the door. They hoped she'd fade, starve, forget her name. But Juana remembered. Every morning she woke before the sun and sat beside the wall where light once touched the stone. And she spoke. Not to the guards, not to the priests, to Philip. His name never left her lips. Querido, mi esposo. Why did you leave? She asked the same question every day, not expecting an answer. But I need one, needing the words to echo off the stone so she could hear them again, to remind herself that once she had been touched, desired, seen, and sometimes she sang. The same lullabies she used to sing to her children, soft, trembling, off-key, trailing into hums. The guard said it made their skin crawl. Some refused to take her food. Others crossed themselves when her voice drifted through the cracks, and sometimes she laughed. But it wasn't a sound of joy. It was the creak of a door left open too long. Then there were the silences, the long ones, when she didn't move for hours, when her breathing slowed so low that candles near her flickered still, when her eyes stared not at the walls, but through them. She saw things. She never said what. But once, a nurse peeked through the door and saw her whispering to the shadows in the corner, nodding as if someone were answering. Another time, she scattered breadcrumbs across the stones and warned the guards not to step on the names. She named the rats. She apologized to moths. She claimed the Virgin Mary stood at the foot of her bed each night, veiled in sorrow, holding a broken clock. And still, every night, she whispered to the empty room, "Don't go. Please stay. Just a little longer." They said she'd gone mad. But madness had rules. This was something else. This was a woman becoming a ghost before death. Not because she wanted to, because no one let her be human anymore, because her grief was louder than prayer. Her love is more constant than mercy. Her memory is stronger than the walls built to erase her. And in that quiet kingdom of candlelight and breath, the Queen still spoke, and someone or something always listened. The seasons change. Outside her window, a slit no wider than a finger, trees bloom, brown, die, return. The river floods and retreats. Birds migrate. The sun shifts. Years pass. But inside the room, nothing changes. The stone walls hold their breath. The air remains damp, cold never leaves, warmth never comes, no flowers, no colour, just the slow, patient grind of time against flesh. Juana remains, her body does not. The silk of her gowns, once royal, is now threadbare, stained. She does not ask for new ones. The crown is gone, the comb is gone. Her once thick hair has thinned into brittle strands, patchy and tangled like dead grass. It falls onto her pillow in the night. She gathers it into a cloth and hides it beneath her bed. Her skin was grey, yellow, and cracked. Her fingernails curve wrong. Her spine bends. One leg drags slightly now when she walks, but still she rises. Still she prays. Sometimes for hours, sometimes all day. Not to be released, not for peace, only for forgiveness. She speaks to saints by name, recites entire psalms from memory. Her lips tremble with Latin like a spell. She fasts often, sometimes for weeks. Her cheeks were hollow, her ribs show, but she says she must remain clean, pure, empty. She no longer asks for food. She no longer asks for anything. The guards begin to fear her. At first it was a pity, then discomfort, then dread. Something in her eyes had changed. Not madness, stillness. The kind of stillness that watches from beneath the earth. They deliver her food quickly now. Set the tray down and leave without speaking. No one wants to be alone in the room with her. Even the rats leave. They used to crawl through the cracks, feast on crumbs, and sleep in her skirts. But now the chamber is silent. Too cold, too still, like a tomb that breathes. Sometimes the guards hear her at night, not talking, not praying, just moving, walking the same 5 steps, again, again, again. Floorboards groaning under bare feet, night after night, year after year. Some say she's counting. Others say she's tracing Philip's name with her feet. Others say she no longer knows why. There are days she speaks no words at all, not even to him, not even to God. It's not that she can't speak, she just forgets how. The vocabulary of queenship, of motherhood, of womanhood, it crumbled. Only fragments remain. But she remembers grief, always grief. She remembers the weight of her child's hand in hers, the smell of Philip's neck, the laughter of court musicians, the sting of being kissed in public for the sake of appearances. She remembers being alive, and that's what keeps her upright. Not hope, memory. Even when her bones ache too much to kneel, even when her skin splits from the cold, even when the room stinks of damp stone and old sweat and unwashed royalty, she remembers. And so she remains, a queen without a crown, a prisoner without bars, a woman whose story had no ending because the people writing it refused to look at her. They said she lost her mind, but minds don't fade, they ferment, and hers, still sharp beneath the rot, whispers silently through the night. You tried to forget me, but I remember everything. Her son became an emperor, Charles V, ruler of 2 worlds, Spain and the Holy Roman Empire. He wore 6 crowns, commanded armies, colonized continents, the most powerful man alive. And still, he kept his mother locked away. He never looked her in the eye. He never set her free. He called it protection, stability, a necessary containment for the good of the realm. But in private it was something colder. Shame. Juana had become a legend, but the wrong kind. Not the virgin queen, not the warrior queen, not the wise matriarch. She was the ghost in the attic of the empire, the woman who talked to corpses, the queen who wouldn't die, and worse, she was still, legally, monarch of Castile. Charles needed that title, but he didn't take it. He didn't have to. He just made her disappear. He wrote laws in her name, issued edicts, held ceremonies with empty thrones. Coins still bore her face, documents opened with her title. But no one spoke of her. Not in court, not in church, not in the street. Just one locked room in Tordesillas, guarded by men who never made eye contact, surrounded by walls that hadn't heard joy in 20 years. The rumours spread faster than letters, that she had gone blind, that her voice was not her own, her skin no longer aged, that she had died already, but kept breathing. Some said Philip's ghost possessed her. Others claimed she had cursed the empire. A few whispered she had become a saint through suffering. Most believed she was just forgotten. But the truth was worse. She was ignored on purpose. A woman too complicated to kill, too dangerous to release, and too stubborn to surrender. Because she never abdicated, never signed the papers, never yielded the title, never surrendered her right to reign. Even after decades of silence, even after her body failed her, even after Charles stopped acknowledging her existence, she held the crown inside herself. A title carved into bone. No ceremony could take that, and no emperor, no matter how powerful, could erase the fact that the queen he replaced still drew breath. So he let her die behind a door, quietly, efficiently, like a secret cleaned off a table and brushed into the cracks. And when visitors asked about the Queen Mother, Charles smiled and changed the subject. She died in the spring of 1555. No procession, no national mourning, no royal decree announcing the end of her reign, because her reign had ended long ago, without a word, without a war, without a coronation, just a door closed behind her and a world that pretended she never existed. But the title remained. She died still Queen of Castile, at least on parchment, a crown without a court, a sovereign without sovereignty, a name that carried the weight of empire and the silence of abandonment. The news reached the court in a whisper. Charles, her son, the emperor of half the world, offered no public grief, no monument, no eulogy, no mass of state, just instructions. Bury her quickly, quietly. And so they did. In a plain tomb beside the husband she had loved too much. Not beside her mother, not near her children, just Philip, his bones long turned to dust, his absence still the loudest voice in her life. There was no choir, no tolling bell, no wreath of empire, just a body lowered into the earth. But the tower remembered. The walls of Tordesillas still held the imprint of her pacing. The guards, long since rotated and replaced, passed down stories, of songs sung in the dark and of prayers whispered at odd hours, of footsteps that echoed long after she stopped walking. Some say the room grew colder after she died. Others say the rats never returned, and a few, the ones who walked the hall late at night, swore they heard her voice, faint, steady, repeating the same word, Philip, over and over. She had waited 27 years in that stone room, waited without a throne, without a mirror, without warmth, and when she finally fell still, the world did not pause, it moved on. But something of her remained, not entirely, because grief like hers doesn't vanish, it settles, in stone, in silence, in memory. And so, behind that sealed wooden door, in a room without a crown or court, the last breath of Queen Juana of Castile passed without a witness. But the walls remember, and sometimes, if you walk the corridor slowly enough, if you listen to your footsteps, if you stop before the door that never opened, you might still hear her, waiting,